cold-hearted millionaire sees a homeless woman soothing his crying son. Unaware she's the ex-wife he abandoned years ago before anything else. If you're watching this from a place of struggle, know that you're not alone. Drop a heart below. The gentle autumn breeze carried fallen leaves across Jefferson Park as Emma Davis pulled her worn cardigan tighter around her thin frame. At 52, she looked nearly a decade older, life's hardships etched into the premature lines on her face. Her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with gray and cut unevenly. She sat on her usual bench, the one with the chipped green paint and the view of the playground. Emma's weathered hands clutched a small paper bag containing half a sandwich, her dinner for the evening before returning to the shelter. The last. 7 years had stripped her of everything but her dignity, which she clung to with fierce determination. A child's laughter pierced the melancholy afternoon. Emma looked up to see a small boy, perhaps 6 years old, chasing pigeons with unbridled joy. His expensive sneakers and pristine jacket spoke of privilege, but his uninhibited giggles spoke only of childhood innocence. "I'm gonna catch one," the boy shouted to no one in particular as he darted after a particularly plump pigeon. Emma smiled despite herself. Something about the boy's dark eyes and the way his hair fell across his forehead struck a chord deep within her heart, a painful familiarity she couldn't quite place. Then it happened. The boy's untied shoelace caught under his foot, sending him tumbling onto the gravel path. For a moment, silence hung in the air before his face crumpled and tears welled up. Without thinking, Emma was on her feet, her own hunger and fatigue forgotten as she hurried to the child's side. "Hey there, brave one," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "May I take a look?" The boy sniffled and nodded, watching with curious eyes as Emma gently examined his scraped knee. "It's just a little battle wound," she assured him, pulling a clean tissue from her pocket, one of the few luxuries she allowed herself. She dabbed at the small injury with tender care. "My name's Tyler," the boy offered, his tears already subsiding. "What's yours?" "I'm Emma," she replied, her hands moving instinctively to his shoelaces. "Let's fix these troublemakers, shall we?" Tyler watched in fascination as Emma tied his laces in a peculiar double-loop pattern. "That's not how Daddy does it," he observed. "It's a special knot," Emma explained. "My mother taught me when I was just about your age. These won't come undone, no matter how fast you run." From the sleek black Bentley parked at the curb, Richard Parker watched the interaction with interest. At 38, success had given him everything money could buy: the luxury car, the mansion in the hills, the tailored suit that fit his athletic frame perfectly. Everything except someone who could connect with his son the way this stranger just had. The woman's genuine care for Tyler stirred something in Richard, a memory perhaps, or a longing. There was something vaguely familiar about her, though he couldn't place it. If he had looked more closely at her eyes, he might have recognized Sarah, the wife he had abandoned 7 years ago when she was 3 months pregnant. But time and hardship had transformed her beyond his recognition. Richard stepped out of his car and approached them, his designer shoes crunching on the gravel path. "Thank you for helping him," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Parker, Tyler's father." Emma looked up, and for a brief moment, her heart stopped. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she accepted Richard's outstretched hand. His touch, once so familiar, now felt like that of a stranger. 7 years had changed him too. Silver threads now wove through his dark hair at the temples, and fine lines framed his eyes. Most noticeable was the thin scar that ran along his left jawline, the result of an accident she knew nothing about. "Emma Davis," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. She had practiced this moment in her mind countless times, yet nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing before the man who had abandoned her and their unborn child. "Daddy, she tied my shoes with magic knots," Tyler exclaimed proudly, displaying his sneakers. "Can she come have dinner with us, please?" Richard laughed, that same rich laugh that once made her heart soar. "Tyler, we can't just invite strangers to dinner." But she's not a stranger anymore. She's Emma. The boy's logic was impeccable in its simplicity. Richard studied Emma's face, searching for something he couldn't quite identify. Well, Ms. Davis, it seems my son has made up his mind. Would you join us for dinner? It's the least I can do to thank you for taking care of Tyler. Every instinct told Emma to refuse, to walk away before she was pulled deeper into this cruel twist of fate. Yet the chance to spend time with the son she never knew outweighed all reason. I'd be honored, she said quietly. 30 minutes later, they sat in a modest family restaurant, Richard's concession to her visible discomfort when he initially suggested his usual upscale establishment. Tyler chatted animatedly between them, building a bridge across 7 years of absence. Do you have kids? Richard asked during a lull in conversation, casually cutting into his steak. Emma set down her fork, memories flooding back with painful clarity. Richard standing in their small apartment, face contorted with anger. This baby is just another burden I can't afford right now, he had shouted. How do I even know it's mine? The door slamming behind him had been the last she'd heard until his lawyer contacted her months later. No, she answered finally. No children. Tyler piped up. Dad adopted me when I was a baby. My birth mom couldn't take care of me. Emma's knuckles whitened around her water glass. So that was the story he had crafted. Is that so? She managed, her eyes meeting Richard's across the table. Richard shifted uncomfortably. It's a bit more complicated than that. Tyler's mother was going through a difficult time. I was in a position to provide him with stability, a partial truth, the most dangerous kind of lie. As Tyler became absorbed in his dessert, Richard leaned forward. It's strange, he said softly, but Tyler rarely takes to people the way he has with you. He's usually quite shy around strangers. He's not shy around me because we share the same blood, Emma thought bitterly. Children have good instincts, she replied instead, watching Tyler. His eyes, her eyes, focused intently on constructing the perfect ice cream spoonful. When dinner concluded, Richard handed her his business card. Tyler's nanny just gave notice. Last week I've been interviewing candidates, but... He glanced at his son, who was holding Emma's hand. Would you consider coming by tomorrow to discuss the position? I have a feeling you'd be perfect. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. Here was Richard unknowingly inviting his abandoned wife to care for the child he had taken from her. I'll think about it, Emma said, her mind already racing with possibilities. As their car pulled away, Tyler waved enthusiastically from the window. Emma raised her hand in return, tears threatening to spill. Standing alone on the sidewalk, she pulled from her pocket the only treasure she had managed to keep through years of homelessness. A small silver locket containing an ultrasound image of the baby she thought she had lost forever. 3 days passed before Emma returned to Jefferson Park, her mind wrestling with the decision before her. The bench felt colder today, or perhaps it was just the chill of uncertainty settling in her bones. She had spent countless hours in the shelter's bathroom, staring at her reflection, searching for traces of the woman Richard had once known. The woman she had been before desperation and homelessness had weathered her skin and dulled the spark in her eyes. I was hoping I'd find you here. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma looked up to see Richard standing before her, immaculate in a charcoal suit despite the casual setting. Unlike their first encounter, he was alone. Where's Tyler? She asked, unable to hide the concern in her voice. With his tutor. I came specifically to speak with you. Richard sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. You never called. About the position. Emma traced the peeling paint on the bench with her fingertip. I'm not sure it would be appropriate. Tyler hasn't stopped talking about you since dinner. He's convinced you're some sort of childhood whisperer. Richard's smile faded into something more serious. The truth is, Ms. Davis, my son doesn't connect easily with adults. His previous nanny was efficient but cold. Tyler needs someone who sees him, really sees him. Of course I see him, Emma thought. He has my eyes, my temperament, my habit of tilting his head when he's curious. What exactly would this position entail? She asked carefully. Live-in childcare. You'd have your own room in the East Wing, all meals provided, weekends off unless previously arranged. Richard named a salary that made Emma's breath catch. More money than she had seen in years. Tyler's in first grade. He needs someone after school, someone to help with homework, prepare meals when I'm working late, that sort of thing. The possibility of living under the same roof as her son was intoxicating. Yet the thought of facing Richard daily, pretending to be a stranger, made her stomach twist. "Why me?" she asked directly. "You know nothing about me. My background, my qualifications." Richard's gaze drifted across the park. "Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Mine are saying you're exactly what Tyler needs right now." He paused. "Unless there's something in your past I should know about? Like the fact that I'm your ex-wife? That you abandoned me when your first business failed, accusing me of being a burden? That you somehow managed to take our baby while I was unconscious after birth complications?" "Nothing relevant to childcare," Emma replied evenly. "Then what's holding you back?" The question hung between them. Emma weighed her options carefully. Refusing meant continuing her precarious existence in shelters, scraping by on minimum wage jobs when she could find them. Accepting meant a chance, to know her son, to understand how Richard had found him, to eventually reveal the truth when the time was right. And Richard clearly didn't recognize her. The Sarah he had left was a vibrant woman of 35 with bright eyes and unwavering confidence. The Emma before him was a shadow, worn down by years of hardship that had etched lines around her eyes and stripped the color from her cheeks. "I'll need references," Richard continued, mistaking her silence for negotiation. "Background check is standard, of course." Emma tensed. A thorough background check might reveal her true identity. "I've been transient for some time. My documentation is limited." Richard studied her with newfound curiosity. "You're running from something." "Not running. Just trying to rebuild." At least, that wasn't a lie. After a moment, Richard nodded. "We all have chapters we'd rather not revisit. I'm willing to waive the formal background check if you can start immediately. Tyler's been difficult since Jessica left." Emma took a deep breath. "I'll need to collect my things. I can have someone accompany you." "That won't be necessary," she said quickly, thinking of the shelter. "I travel light these days." As they stood to leave, Richard handed her a piece of paper with an address. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We'll consider it a trial period, for both of us." Emma watched him walk away, his confident stride unchanged by the years. She opened, her locket gazing at the grainy ultrasound image. "I'm coming, little one," she whispered. "After all this time, I'm finally coming home to you." The iron gates of the Parker estate parted silently as the taxi approached, revealing a sweeping driveway lined with perfectly manicured maple trees. Emma clutched her worn backpack tightly against her chest, containing everything she owned in the world. 3 changes of clothes, a dog-eared paperback, and her precious locket safely tucked into an inner pocket. "Quite the place," the driver commented, whistling low as the sprawling mansion came into view. "Someone's expecting you?" Emma nodded, her throat too dry for words. The house was exactly as she had imagined it during those long nights in the shelter, the home Richard would have built after his second company succeeded, the home that should have been hers too, the home where her child had grown without her. The taxi crunched to a stop on the circular gravel driveway. Emma paid with crumpled bills saved from her last cleaning job, ignoring the driver's pitying glance at her shabby appearance against the backdrop of such opulence. The massive oak door swung open before she could knock. A stern-faced woman in her 60s stood in the doorway, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her posture rigid as a soldier's. "Ms. Davis, I presume?" The woman's eyes traveled from Emma's scuffed boots to her faded jacket, making no effort to disguise her assessment. "I'm Margaret Wells, the housekeeper. Mr. Parker informed me of your arrival." "Thank you for—" Emma began, but Margaret had already turned and started walking down the marble-floored hallway. "Mr. Parker has been called to an emergency meeting. He asked me to show you to your quarters and acquaint you with the household routines." Margaret's voice echoed against the high ceilings. "Tyler is currently at school. You'll meet him when he returns at 3. Emma followed in silence, trying not to gape at the surroundings. Original artwork adorned the walls and plush carpets muffled their footsteps as they climbed the grand staircase. Family photos lined the upper hallway, all featuring Richard and Tyler at various ages, starting from infancy. Emma paused at one showing a 3-year-old Tyler on Richard's shoulders at what appeared to be a carnival. That was taken at Tyler's first Founders' Day festival, Margaret offered, noticing Emma's interest. Mr. Parker has been a devoted father since the adoption. Adoption? Emma prompted cautiously. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Tyler's mother was a young woman in difficult circumstances. Mr. Parker adopted him as a newborn, quite the humanitarian gesture. He rarely discusses it, prefers people to see Tyler simply as his son, not his adopted son. A convenient narrative, Emma thought bitterly. A humanitarian gesture rather than a calculated theft. They continued down a long corridor to what Margaret called the East Wing. The room she opened was modest compared to the rest of the house, but still larger than any space Emma had occupied in years. A queen-sized bed with crisp white linens, a small writing desk beneath a window overlooking the gardens, and a private bathroom with gleaming fixtures. "This will be your space," Margaret explained. "Meals are served in the kitchen unless Mr. Parker requests your presence in the dining room. Your responsibilities primarily concern Tyler, though I expect common areas you use to be kept tidy." Emma set her backpack on the bed. "Thank you, Margaret." The housekeeper lingered in the doorway. "Mr. Parker mentioned your background check was waived. That's unusual." "I understand your concern," Emma replied carefully. "I assure you, my only interest is Tyler's well-being." Margaret's lips thinned. "Many have come and gone in this house. Ms. Davis, Tyler has had enough inconsistency. If you're not planning to stay, better to leave now before he becomes attached." With that parting wisdom, Margaret left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone at last, Emma sank onto the bed, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She unzipped her backpack with trembling hands and removed a small plastic bag from its hidden compartment in the lining. Inside was her treasure, the locket, yes, but also a birth certificate folded and sealed in waterproof plastic, preserved through homeless shelters and rainstorms. The one piece of evidence she had managed to keep of her child's existence. Emma carefully placed these items in the drawer of the bedside table, then moved to the window. From here she could see a playground set in the backyard, a swing, slide, and climbing structure that would be any child's dream. "My son lives here," she thought, pressing her palm against the cool glass. "He has everything I couldn't give him, except the truth." The digital clock on the nightstand showed 10:45 a.m. Just over 4 hours until she would see Tyler again, this time as his caretaker, an official role in his life, however false the pretense. "One step at a time," she whispered, to herself, the mantra that had carried her through 7 years of loss and survival. One step at a time. Does this letter make the "b" sound or the "d" sound? Tyler frowned at the worksheet spread before him, his small finger hovering uncertainly between 2 letters. "Look at it carefully," Emma encouraged gently. "Remember the trick we practiced? The B has the belly first, then the tall line. The has the tall line first, then the belly." Tyler's face brightened. "So this one's a B." He circled it triumphantly and grinned up at Emma, revealing a gap where a front tooth had recently fallen out. 3 weeks had passed since Emma moved into the Parker mansion, and each day brought new discoveries about her son. Tyler struggled, with letters that mirrored each other, B and D, P and Q, a classic sign of dyslexia that Richard either hadn't noticed or had chosen to ignore. "You're getting so much better," Emma praised, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Let's try 3 more, then we can take a break." The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows as they worked at the large island counter. Emma had discovered that Tyler concentrated better in bright, open spaces rather than the formal study where previous tutors had tried to force learning. It was one of many small adjustments she'd made to his routine, adjustments based on research she'd done years ago during her pregnancy, when she'd dreamed of teaching her child herself. "Miss Davis," Margaret's voice interrupted their session. Mr. Parker would like to see you in his office when you have a moment. Emma nodded, turning back to Tyler. Finish these 3 letters, then you can have your snack. I'll be right back. Richard's office occupied the southwest corner of the house, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of both the mountains and the meticulously landscaped backyard. He stood as Emma entered, gesturing to a chair across from his imposing desk. Tyler's teacher called today. He began without preamble. She says he's shown remarkable improvement in the past few weeks. She mentioned techniques he's using to distinguish letters, techniques she didn't teach him. Emma met his gaze steadily. I noticed he was struggling with certain letters. The methods I'm using are fairly standard for children with dyslexic tendencies. Richard's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Dyslexia? No one has ever suggested. It's often overlooked, especially in bright children who compensate in other ways. Tyler memorizes everything he hears. He's been getting by on his exceptional memory rather than actual reading. Richard leaned back, in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Emma's heart ache. I've had him tested for everything. How did everyone miss this? You have to know what you're looking for, Emma said softly. And you have to spend enough time watching how he approaches reading, not just what he achieves. For a moment, Richard seemed lost in thought. Then he refocused on Emma with newfound respect. Where did you learn about this? You mentioned your background was complicated. Emma had prepared for this question. I studied early childhood education before my circumstances changed. I never completed my degree, but I retained the knowledge. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had been halfway through her teaching degree when she married Richard, then put her education on hold to support his first business venture, the one that failed and triggered his abandonment. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. Richard stood and walked to the window, watching Tyler play outside with the family's golden retriever. He's happier too, more confident. He's an amazing child, Emma said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Richard turned to her with an unexpected smile. Would you be willing to join us for dinner tonight? Not in the kitchen, but properly in the dining room. I'd like to include you in some decisions about Tyler's education going forward. That evening, as they discussed summer learning programs and potential specialized tutoring, Emma felt the strangest sensation, as if they were a normal family, planning their child's future together. The fantasy was both sweet and painful. Later, that night, a scream tore through the quiet house. Emma rushed from her room to find Tyler thrashing in his bed, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Shh, you're safe, she whispered, gathering him into her arms. Instinctively, she began humming a lullaby, the same one she had sung to her pregnant belly each night, imagining the child growing within. Tyler's breathing slowly steadied. His eyes, heavy with interrupted sleep, blinked up at her. I know. That song, he murmured drowsily. From somewhere before, Emma's heart nearly stopped. It's an old lullaby, she managed to say. Perhaps someone sang it to you when you were very little. Maybe. Tyler yawned, nestling against her shoulder. It makes the scary things go away. That's what it's supposed to do, Emma whispered, fighting back tears. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. As Tyler drifted back to sleep, Emma continued humming, her mind racing. Had some part of him remembered? Had the melody penetrated the fog of infancy to remain lodged somewhere in his subconscious? The possibility was both wonderful and terrifying. From the doorway came a soft sound. Emma looked up to find Richard watching them, his expression unreadable, in the dim glow of the nightlight. How much had he heard? How much did he suspect? Emma held her breath, but Richard merely nodded once in acknowledgement before disappearing back into the shadowed hallway. Emma. Watch this, Tyler called from the top of the jungle gym, waving with both hands, momentarily releasing his grip on the bars. Emma's heart leapt to her throat, a mother's instinct that she had to disguise as professional concern. Both hands on the bars, please, she called back, smiling to soften the instruction. The weekend sunshine had drawn them to the community park, a compromise between Emma's suggestion of a public playground and Richard's usual preference for private, exclusive spaces. Tyler had blossomed in the past 6 weeks under Emma's care, his confidence growing alongside his reading skills. "He's like a different child," remarked Richard, who had surprised them both by taking a rare Saturday off to join their outing. He sat beside Emma on the bench, his casual attire, jeans and a simple button-down, making him almost unrecognizable as the corporate titan whose face occasionally graced business magazines. "Children respond to consistency and understanding," Emma replied, keeping her eyes on Tyler. "He just needed someone to see his challenges as opportunities, not limitations." Richard turned to study her profile. "You're something of a mystery, Emma Davis." A sleek silver Audi pulled up to the curb, interrupting whatever Richard might have said next. From it emerged a woman whose confident stride and impeccable appearance announced her importance before she'd spoken a word. "Richard, there you are." The woman approached, designer sunglasses perched atop her perfectly styled blonde hair. "I've been calling all morning." "Vanessa." Richard stood, checking his phone with a frown. "I put it on silent for family day. Is something wrong?" "The Singapore deal is wobbling. Hamilton needs you to call him." She stopped abruptly, noticing Emma for the first time. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." Richard gestured between them. "Vanessa Mitchell, this is Emma Davis, Tyler's new caregiver." "Emma, Vanessa is my business partner and oldest friend." Vanessa extended a manicured hand, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Charmed. So you're the miracle worker I've been hearing about. Richard says Tyler's completely transformed under your care." Before Emma could respond, Tyler came bounding over. "Aunt Vanessa, did you bring me anything? Don't I always?" Vanessa produced a small gift-wrapped package from her purse. "Just a little something I picked up in Tokyo last week." As Tyler tore into the present, a sophisticated remote-controlled car, Emma observed the dynamic between Richard and Vanessa. There was history there, comfortable and complex. Vanessa stood slightly closer to Richard than necessary, her body language possessive. "Emma, would you mind taking Tyler for ice cream?" Richard asked, handing her some bills. "Vanessa and I need to discuss a business matter." Emma recognized the dismissal for what it was. "Of course, come on, Tyler. Let's see if they have your favorite flavor." As they walked toward the ice cream stand, Emma felt Vanessa's gaze boring into her back. "I don't think Aunt Vanessa likes me very much," Tyler observed with a child's unfiltered honesty. "What makes you say that?" Emma asked, surprised by his perception. Tyler shrugged. "She looked at you like Brendan looks at the new kid who sits at our lunch table." From the mouth of babes, Emma thought. When they returned, Vanessa was showing Richard something on her tablet, their heads bent close together. She quickly closed the screen as they approached. "All settled?" Emma asked lightly. "For now," Richard replied. "Vanessa will be staying for dinner tonight. She's been away for 3 weeks and wants to catch up with Tyler." That evening, Emma served dinner and then excused herself to eat in the kitchen, as was customary when Richard had guests. But halfway through her solitary meal, the dining room door swung open. "Join us, please," Richard insisted. "Tyler wants to tell you about his science project idea." Vanessa's tight smile spoke volumes as Emma took a seat at the formal table. "Emma, Richard tells me you've been quite secretive about your background," Vanessa said during a lull in conversation. "Very mysterious." "There's no mystery," Emma replied evenly. "Just not much worth sharing." "Everyone has a story," Vanessa persisted. "Where did you work before coming here?" "Various places. Most recently custodial services at Mercy Hospital." "And before that?" Richard cleared his throat. "Vanessa, this isn't a job interview. Emma's already proven herself." "I'm just making conversation," Vanessa said innocently. "After all, she's caring for the most precious person in your life. Don't you want to know everything about her?" Later, as Emma helped Tyler prepare for bed, she overheard voices from Richard's study, completely unvetted. Vanessa was saying. No formal background check, no references. For all you know, she could be anyone. She's good with Tyler. That's all that matters, Richard responded firmly. Is it? Because I distinctly remember helping you secure custody of that boy through a very delicate legal process. If his biological mother ever resurfaced, she won't. Jack ensured the adoption was airtight. Legal documents can be challenged, especially when the birth mother never explicitly signed away her rights. There was a long pause before Richard spoke again, his voice lower now. I appreciate your concern, Vanessa. I'll have Jack run a deeper check on Emma discreetly. Will that satisfy you? Emma's blood ran cold. A deeper investigation would surely reveal her true identity. She had perhaps days before her secret was exposed before she lost Tyler a second time. Tyler, she said, forcing calm into her voice as she returned to his bedside. How would you feel about a special field trip tomorrow? Just you and me? Like an adventure. His eyes lit up. Exactly like an adventure, Emma replied, already calculating what she would need to take, how far they could get, whether she had enough saved for 2 bus tickets out of state. But as she looked at his trusting face, the reality of what she was contemplating hit her. She couldn't kidnap her own son, couldn't tear him from the only home he'd ever known, the father he loved, regardless of how Richard had obtained custody. There had to be another way. Morning sunlight dappled the backyard garden as Emma spread a checkered blanket over the grass. The special field trip she had impulsively suggested had transformed into a backyard picnic, a compromise with herself after a sleepless night wrestling with impossible choices. Can we make this a weekly tradition? Tyler asked, carefully, arranging strawberries in a perfect circle around the edge of his plate. His methodical nature reminded Emma so much of herself that it made her heart ache. I don't see why not, she replied, watching as he meticulously cut his sandwich into precise triangles. Everyone needs a picnic day. The past 12 hours had been a silent battle within Emma's soul. The instinct to run, to take Tyler and disappear, had warred with the rational knowledge that such an action would only bring harm. Tyler was happy and secure. Uprooting him from his life based on her own desires would be selfish, no matter how justified her anger toward Richard. Emma? Tyler's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Did you have a mommy and daddy when you were little? The question caught her off guard. Yes, I did. My father passed away when I was about your age, but my mother lived until I was in college. Do you have any kids? The innocent inquiry sent a jolt through her body. Emma set down her glass of lemonade, choosing her words carefully. I had a son once, she said softly, but he went to live with someone else who could take better care of him at the time. Tyler's eyes widened. Didn't you want him? More than anything in the world, Emma whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. But sometimes life doesn't give us what we want even when we try our hardest. Tyler considered this with the serious contemplation only a 6-year-old could muster. Maybe you could find him someday, he suggested brightly. Like in the movies, where families get back together after being apart. Emma felt a tear escape despite her best efforts. She quickly brushed it away. Maybe someday. I didn't know I had another mom until I was 4, Tyler said, switching topics with a child's fluid logic. Dad said she couldn't keep me because she was sick, but that she loved me very much. Then he said she went to heaven. Emma froze. This was the first she'd heard of this particular version of the story. Richard had fabricated not just an adoption narrative, but a deceased birth mother. Your dad told you that? She asked carefully. Tyler nodded, picking at the crust of his sandwich. Sometimes I wonder what she looked like, if I look like her at all. You have her eyes, Emma wanted to say. Her smile when you're truly happy, not just being polite. The way you tilt your head when you're curious about something. That's from her too. Instead, she said, I'm sure she would be very proud of the boy you're becoming. A shadow fell across the blanket. Emma looked up to find Richard standing over them, his face unreadable. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? Mind if I join you too? He asked, loosening his tie. Tyler brightened. "Dad," Emma made cucumber sandwiches, the fancy kind without crusts. Richard lowered himself onto the blanket, looking strangely vulnerable outside his usual environments of office, car, or formal dining room. So she did. Very sophisticated picnic fare. An awkward silence settled over them as Richard picked up one of the tiny sandwiches, examining it as though it were an artifact from another civilization. "We were just talking about families," Tyler announced, unaware of the tension vibrating between the adults. "Emma had a little boy once, but he went to live with someone else. Isn't that sad, Dad?" Richard's eyes shot to Emma's face. Yes, that is sad." Emma kept her expression neutral, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "It was a long time ago." "Do you ever worry," Richard asked suddenly, "that his birth mother might come looking for him someday?" The question hung in the air between them. Was he speaking as Richard to Emma, or was he unconsciously addressing Sarah? "I imagine that's always a concern in adoption cases," Emma replied carefully. "It is." Richard set down his sandwich untouched. "I've always feared that someday, Tyler's biological mother might reappear and try to reclaim him, that she might have regretted her decision, or that her circumstances might have changed." "They weren't decisions," Emma wanted to scream. "You took him while I was unconscious. You manipulated the system when I was at my most vulnerable." Tyler looked between them, sensing the shift in mood. "But you'd never let me go, right, Dad?" Richard pulled his son into a tight embrace. "Never. You're my son, Tyler. Nothing will ever change that." Over the boy's shoulder, Richard's eyes met Emma's, filled with a fierce protectiveness that was both admirable and infuriating. He truly loved Tyler. That much was undeniable. But that love had been built on deception and theft. "I have the best idea," Tyler exclaimed, breaking free from his father's arms. "Let's all play catch. I'll get my baseball." As he dashed toward the house, Richard's phone rang. He checked the screen and sighed. "I have to take this. It's Jack, my attorney," he explained to Emma. "Something about those contracts we discussed." Emma nodded, her momentary courage faltering. Had Vanessa already set the investigation in motion? How much time did she have left in her son's life? "We'll continue this conversation later," Richard said, his tone making it clear he meant their discussion about her son, not the picnic plans. As he walked away, phone pressed to his ear, Emma closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The truth hovered on her lips, ready to spill out at any moment. But the time wasn't right. Not yet. Not until she understood exactly how Richard had managed to take Tyler from her, and what legal recourse she might have to stay in his life once the truth emerged. Tyler raced back, baseball glove on one hand, ball in the other, his face alight, with the simple joy of having both adults he cared about most in one place, sharing his day. If only he knew. The ornate grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times as Emma folded the last of Tyler's laundry. 2 months had passed since she'd entered the Parker household, each day deepening her bond with her son while increasing her anxiety about discovery. The background check Richard had mentioned to Vanessa had apparently been delayed. Emma had overheard him telling his business partner that Jack was swamped with the merger case. A temporary reprieve, but nothing more. The doorbell's resonant chime echoed through the house. With Margaret out running errands and Richard at the office, Emma set aside the laundry basket and went to answer it. A tall man in his early 60s stood on the doorstep, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting authority tempered by kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Good afternoon," he said with a warm smile. "I'm Jack Reynolds, Richard's attorney." "I have some documents he asked me to drop off." Emma's stomach clenched. Jack Reynolds, the very man Richard had mentioned, helped secure Tyler's adoption, the legal architect of her separation from her child. "Of course," she managed, stepping aside. "Please come in. Mr. Parker is at the office, but he should be home within the hour. Would you like to wait?" Jack entered, glancing around appreciatively. "Beautiful home, isn't it? I remember when Richard purchased it. just before Tyler came into his life. He wanted a proper family home. He studied Emma with interest. I don't believe we've met. Are you the new nanny Richard mentioned? Emma Davis, she confirmed, leading him toward Richard's study. I've been with Tyler for about 2 months now. Jack paused, his head tilting slightly. Davis, you seem familiar somehow. Have we met before? A cold wave of fear washed over Emma. I don't believe so. I would remember meeting Mr. Parker's attorney. Perhaps you just remind me of someone, Jack mused, following her into the study. I've been practicing law for 35 years. Faces begin to blur after a while. Emma gestured to a leather armchair. May I offer you something to drink while you wait? Coffee would be wonderful. Black, please. He set his briefcase on Richard's desk, removing a folder. Just some custody renewal paperwork, standard procedure. Emma froze halfway to the door. Custody renewal? Jack looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Yes, although renewal is perhaps the wrong term. It's more of a formality at this point, the final step in making Richard's guardianship permanent, I thought. Isn't the adoption already finalized? Emma asked, struggling to keep her voice casual. Jack studied her with newfound interest. Richard must trust you a great deal to discuss Tyler's situation. He seemed to debate with himself before continuing. The circumstances were unusual. Tyler's birth mother never formally surrendered her parental rights. She disappeared from the hospital after delivery, which allowed Richard to petition for emergency custody. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Emma steadied herself against the doorframe, memories flooding back, the premature labor, the emergency C-section, waking groggy and in pain to be told her baby was being temporarily placed in state custody due to her unstable living situation. But surely they searched for the mother? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Extensively, Jack confirmed, though his slight grimace suggested otherwise. But she had no fixed address, no family contacts in her records. She simply vanished. After the required waiting period, Richard was able to petition for permanent custody, given his biological relationship and financial stability. So that was how it happened. Richard had tracked her to the hospital, used his connections to manipulate the system while she was at her most vulnerable, then created a narrative of abandonment. Richard must have been very determined, Emma said carefully. Jack's expression softened. He was, despite their troubled history. I believe Richard always regretted how things ended with Sarah. That was her name, Tyler's mother. When he discovered she was pregnant, something changed in him. He became obsessed with making things right, though, perhaps not in the conventional way. Emma struggled to process this version of events. In Jack's narrative, Richard was nearly heroic, a father determined to care for his child when the mother had supposedly abandoned him. And the mother, Sarah? She never tried to make contact? Emma pressed, needing to understand how her desperate search had been so thoroughly thwarted. Not that I'm aware of, Jack replied, studying her with increasing curiosity. Though between us, the notification procedures were expedited. Richard had concerns about her stability. The medical records indicated previous mental health issues. Postpartum depression after my miscarriage the year before, Emma thought bitterly. Twisted into a weapon against me. A small voice interrupted, them from the doorway. Emma, I'm home from school. Tyler stood there, backpack still on, eyes lighting up when he spotted Jack. Uncle Jack, did you bring me anything? Jack laughed, tension dissolving. Don't I always? Check the side pocket of my briefcase. As Tyler eagerly explored the briefcase, Jack lowered his voice. I've known that boy since he was 3 days old. Watched Richard transform from a ruthless businessman into a devoted father. Whatever the circumstances, Tyler has had a good life. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes, he has. Still, Jack continued, watching Tyler unwrap a small toy car. I've always wondered about Sarah. Whether she regretted her choice, whether she ever thinks about the child she left behind. Perhaps, Emma said softly. She never had a choice at all. Jack's eyes snapped to hers, something like recognition flickering in their depths. But before he could respond, Tyler tugged at Emma's hand, breaking the moment. "Can we have cookies?" "Before homework," he pleaded. "Just one," Emma conceded, grateful for the interruption. Then straight to math. As she led Tyler toward the kitchen, Emma could feel Jack's gaze following her, thoughtful, puzzled, as though assembling pieces of a puzzle he hadn't realized was before him. The walls of her carefully constructed facade were beginning to crack. Time was running out. Emma sat at the small desk in her room, the bedside lamp casting a warm glow as she reviewed Tyler's latest reading assessment. His progress over the past 10 weeks had been remarkable. From struggling with basic letter recognition to reading simple sentences, she allowed herself a moment of pride before the familiar ache set in. These were milestones she should have witnessed from the beginning. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Richard standing there, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more hesitant. "May I come in?" he asked. Emma stepped aside, suddenly conscious of her sparse quarters. Besides the standard furnishings, she had added just one personal touch, a small vase of wildflowers Tyler had picked for her. Richard paced the small space before turning to face her. "Jack mentioned that you two had an interesting conversation yesterday." Emma kept her expression neutral. "He was quite knowledgeable about Tyler's history. That's what concerns me." Richard's eyes searched hers. "He said you asked specific questions about Tyler's mother and the custody arrangements." "Natural curiosity," Emma replied, maintaining steady eye contact. "I care about Tyler. Understanding his background helps me connect with him." Richard nodded slowly, but doubt lingered in his expression. "Jack thought you seemed unusually invested in those details." A heavy silence stretched between them. Emma sensed they were approaching a precipice, but before she could respond, Richard's phone chimed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's Vanessa. She says it's urgent." He answered the call, keeping his eyes on Emma. "Yes? I'm with her now." Emma could hear Vanessa's voice, tinny but unmistakable through the speaker. Richard's expression darkened as he listened. "I see," he said finally. "Send me everything. I'll handle it." He ended the call, his face now unreadable. "Vanessa took it upon herself to investigate your background," he said flatly. "Apparently, you've been less than forthcoming." Emma's heart raced. What did she find? Records from St. Mary's Shelter for Women, Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital, a 3-week stay following what they termed acute traumatic loss and depression, a series of temporary addresses and minimum wage jobs. He paused. "No formal education. Credentials despite your claims of studying childhood development." Relief flooded Emma. They hadn't discovered her true identity yet, followed immediately by new concern. Richard was watching her with growing wariness. "You never mentioned homelessness or psychiatric treatment," he continued. "Vanessa believes you're unstable, possibly dangerous." "I'm neither," Emma replied firmly. "Yes, I've struggled. I lost everything 7 years ago. My home, my family, eventually my hope. The hospital stay was after I..." She paused, deciding how much truth to reveal. "After I lost my child and had nowhere to go." Richard's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for that loss, truly. But you should have been honest about your background. Would you have hired me if I'd told you I was once homeless? That grief drove me to a breaking point?" Emma challenged. "Or would you have seen me as Vanessa does, as damaged, unstable, a risk to your perfect household?" Before Richard could answer, his phone chimed again with an incoming text. He glanced at it and his face hardened. "Vanessa's sending someone to collect Tyler from school early today. She thinks it's safer if you don't have contact with him until we've had a more thorough evaluation of your mental state." "She has no right," Emma protested, panic rising. "Tyler will be confused, frightened." "She's acting on my authority," Richard interrupted. "And frankly, after learning you've hidden significant mental health issues, I'm inclined to agree with her caution." Emma stepped forward, desperate. "Richard, please. I've never done anything to harm Tyler. You've seen how he's thrived with me. I've seen a woman who deliberately concealed her past, who has shown unusual interest in the legal details of my son's adoption, who has no verifiable credentials. His voice grew colder with each point. For all I know, you could be plotting to kidnap him. The irony was so bitter Emma almost laughed. I would never take Tyler from his home. Yet I found a bus schedule in your drawer yesterday when I came to leave your paycheck, with 2 destinations circled. Richard's eyes narrowed. Care to explain that? Emma faltered. She had indeed researched escape options during a moment of panic after overhearing Vanessa and Richard discuss investigating her. A contingency she'd ultimately rejected, but the evidence looked damning. It's not what you think, she began, but Richard raised his hand to silence her. I want you to pack your things, he said, his voice steady but final. I'll arrange for a car to take you wherever you need to go and provide a generous severance. But your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. Please, Emma whispered, tears filling her eyes. Don't do this. Tyler needs consistency. What? Tyler needs his safety and stability, Richard cut in. You've become too attached too quickly. It's not healthy for him or for you. Emma thought of the birth certificate hidden in her drawer, of the revelation that would change everything. For a breathless moment, she considered laying it all bare. Her true identity, the manipulation, the theft of her child. But what then? A legal battle she couldn't afford against a man with unlimited resources? The traumatic upheaval of Tyler's world? Or worse, being dismissed as delusional, permanently separated from her son with no hope of return? Richard mistook her silence for acceptance. His voice softened slightly. I know you care for Tyler. Show it by making this transition as painless as possible for him. I'll tell him you had a family emergency, another lie to add to the tangled web surrounding her son's life. When can I say goodbye? She asked, her voice barely audible. I think it's better this way, Richard replied. Clean break. As Richard left, closing the door quietly behind him, Emma sank onto the bed, a strange numbness spreading through her body. After 10 weeks of rebuilding a connection with her son, after witnessing his smile each morning and his growth each day she was being cast out again, her character questioned, her stability doubted, her love deemed inappropriate. The cruelest part was that Vanessa wasn't entirely wrong. Emma did have an agenda. She was hiding her true identity. She did want to reclaim her place in Tyler's life, but not like this, not through deception or kidnapping. She had wanted the truth to emerge naturally, when Tyler was ready, when she had gathered enough evidence of Richard's manipulation to ensure she wouldn't lose her son a second time. Now she was left with nothing but the small collection of memories from these precious weeks, and the knowledge that somewhere in this mansion, hidden in a drawer beside her bed, lay the one piece of evidence that could change everything. If only she could reach it before they escorted her out. 3 weeks passed, like a slow-motion nightmare for Richard Parker. The mansion that had once buzzed with Tyler's laughter and Emma's gentle voice now echoed with arguments and tears. Tyler had not accepted Emma's sudden departure with the resignation Richard had hoped for. But why did she leave without saying goodbye? Tyler demanded for what seemed the 100th time, pushing away his untouched breakfast. You said it was a family emergency, but she told me she didn't have any family left. Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. The 5th nanny in 3 weeks had just quit that morning, citing Tyler's unmanageable behavior as the reason. His son's grades were slipping, and the school counselor had called twice with concerns about his emotional withdrawal. Sometimes adults have complicated reasons for the things they do. Richard offered weakly. Emma wouldn't just leave me, Tyler insisted, a stubborn set to his jaw that reminded Richard painfully of Sarah in their early days together. She promised we'd finish my space diorama. Richard's gaze fell on a drawing partially hidden under Tyler's science textbook. He gently pulled it out, a crayon illustration of 3 figures holding hands. The tallest labeled Dad, the smallest Me, and the third, a woman with a warm smile, labeled Mom, with Emma's name written underneath and then erased, though still visible. Something cold settled in Richard's stomach. "Tyler," he asked carefully, "did Emma ever tell you she was your mother?" Tyler looked confused. "No, but sometimes I pretended she was." His lower lip trembled. "Is that why she left? Because I pretended?" "No, buddy, of course not." Richard pulled his son close, guilt washing over him. Had he overreacted? Had Vanessa's suspicions poisoned his judgment? The doorbell interrupted the moment. Richard opened it to find Jack Reynolds holding a leather portfolio. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," Jack said, glancing at Tyler. "But we need to finalize those custody documents before my vacation. Got time to talk?" In Richard's study, Jack spread several legal papers across the desk. "Just standard renewals. The court is finally closing Sarah's case permanently given the extended absence. Once you sign these, there can be no future custody challenges." Richard's pen hovered over the signature line. "Jack, what do you remember about Emma Davis?" Jack looked surprised by the question. Seemed devoted to Tyler, quite knowledgeable about childhood development. He paused. "There was something familiar about her, though I couldn't place it." "Familiar how?" Jack removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. "Something in her mannerisms, perhaps. The way she asked about Sarah, about the circumstances of Tyler's custody arrangement." "Asked about Sarah specifically?" Richard's attention sharpened. "She seemed particularly interested in whether Sarah had voluntarily surrendered her rights." Jack replaced his glasses. "Perfectly natural curiosity for someone in her position, but there was an intensity to her questions that struck me as personal, rather than professional." Richard opened his desk drawer and withdrew the file Vanessa had compiled on Emma. No mention of Sarah here. No connection between them. "Perhaps not in official records," Jack mused. "But you know, I always found it odd that Sarah disappeared so completely. A woman doesn't just vanish without a trace, especially one who'd just given birth." "Unless something happened to her," Richard said quietly, a growing unease spreading through him. "Or unless she had no choice," Jack replied. "Richard, I never asked too many questions about how you obtained initial custody while Sarah was hospitalized. Your instructions were clear. Secure your parental rights by any means necessary." Richard stood abruptly, moving to the window. "Emma kept a locket. Tyler mentioned seeing a baby picture inside it, a sonogram." He turned back to Jack, a new urgency in his voice. "What if Emma Davis is Sarah Parker?" The attorney's eyes widened. That would be entirely possible," Richard finished grimly. "The timing fits. Emma appeared 7 years after Sarah, disappeared, significantly changed by hardship. She connected instantly with Tyler." His mind raced through implications. "I need to find her, Richard," Jack cautioned. "If Emma is indeed Sarah, and if she has evidence of any legal irregularities in how you obtained custody—" "I don't care about the legal implications," Richard interrupted. "I care about what I've done. To her. To Tyler." He picked up his son's drawing again, the question mark after mom now painfully clear in its meaning. Tyler had been trying to tell him all along. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's shelter cast harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Richard stood at the reception desk, out of place in his tailored suit among the desperate and downtrodden who sought refuge here. "Emma Davis?" The shelter coordinator frowned at her logbook. "Yes, she returned about 3 weeks ago. Keeps to herself mostly. Works the morning shift at the diner down the street." 20 minutes later, Richard spotted her through the greasy window of Hal's diner. Emma, Sarah, moved efficiently between tables, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her thin frame draped in a faded uniform. The sight of her here, serving coffee to truckers when she should have been helping their son with homework, filled him with a shame so profound it physically hurt. He entered, the bell above the door announcing his presence. Emma looked up, coffee pot frozen mid-pour when she saw him. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the crowded diner. 5-minute break, Emma, called the manager, noting the tension. Outside, in the narrow alley behind the diner, Emma crossed her arms defensively. "How did you find me?" "The shelter," Richard replied. "Tyler misses you terribly." Emma's expression softened momentarily before hardening again. "You made your choice. I'm a risk, remember? I made a mistake." Richard took a step closer, noticing something he hadn't before, a silver chain around her neck disappearing beneath her collar. "The locket you always wear? It has a sonogram inside, doesn't it?" Emma's hand flew protectively to her chest. Her silence was answer enough. "Sarah," Richard whispered. The name hung between them like a physical presence. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she slowly withdrew the locket, opening it to reveal the grainy image of their unborn child. "You knew from the beginning," Richard realized. "You recognized me in the park that day." "You didn't recognize me," she replied bitterly. "What does that tell you about what the last 7 years have done to me, Richard?" Tech mogul's adoption scandal. Did Richard Parker steal his own son? The headline screamed from every newsstand in the city. Emma stared at the morning paper in horror, her hands trembling as she read the subheading. "Hospital employee alleges illegal custody maneuver in Parker adoption case." Her phone rang. "Richard, for the 5th time that morning." "Have you seen it?" he asked when she finally answered. "I've seen it," Emma replied quietly. "How did this happen?" "Someone at Memorial Hospital recognized me when I was looking through old records. Apparently my questions raised red flags." Richard's voice was strained. "I'm holding a press conference at noon to address the allegations." Outside the shelter, Emma spotted the first news van. Soon there would be more, reporters hungry for the human interest angle, the homeless mother reclaiming her long-lost son. She retreated inside, drawing the blinds. By evening, the story had exploded across all media platforms. Richard's press conference had been a masterclass in crisis management, admitting to finding and legally adopting Tyler when his mother was medically incapacitated, while strategically omitting his role in abandoning Sarah and manipulating the custody documents. Emma's phone lit up with messages from journalists offering exclusive interviews, lawyers offering pro bono representation, even reality TV producers sensing ratings gold. She ignored them all, her only concern being Tyler, who must be confused and frightened by the sudden media circus. A text from Richard arrived. "Tyler is asking for you. He's seen your photo on the news. He knows something is happening but doesn't understand what. Please come." Emma closed her eyes, weighing her options. Going public with her side of the story could destroy Richard and traumatize Tyler. Staying silent meant allowing Richard's sanitized version of events to become the accepted narrative. There had to be a middle path, one that prioritized her son's well-being above vengeance or vindication. "I'll come," she texted back. "But not for you, for Tyler." As she packed her meager belongings, Emma caught her reflection in the cracked mirror. The woman who had entered this shelter 3 weeks ago, broken and defeated, was gone. In her place stood a mother prepared to fight. Not with the weapons Richard might expect, but with truth, tempered by compassion for the child caught between them. "I want to hate you," Emma said quietly. They sat in Jack Reynolds' office, neutral territory, in the storm that had engulfed their lives. Outside, reporters maintained their vigil, cameras trained on the building's entrance. "You have every right to," Richard replied, his usual confidence absent. "What I did was unforgivable." Jack cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on practical matters. The media attention makes a quiet resolution impossible now." Emma leaned forward. "Let me be clear. I'm not here to destroy Tyler's world. He knows you as his father. That won't change." "But I took him from you," Richard said, the admission hanging heavy in the air. "I convinced myself I was saving him from an unstable situation. But the truth is, I created that instability when I abandoned you." "Yes, you did." Emma's voice was controlled despite the anger beneath. "You left me pregnant and destitute. Then you manipulated the system when I was at my most vulnerable. Richard couldn't meet her eyes. After my first business failed, I was broken. When I heard you were pregnant, something snapped. I convinced myself the child couldn't be mine, that you were trying to trap me. He paused. By the time I realized the truth, months had passed. I tried to find you, but you'd disappeared. Because I had nowhere to go, Emma countered. I was sleeping in my car until it was repossessed. When I went into premature labor, I was malnourished and severely anemic. Richard's face contorted with guilt. When I found you in that hospital, unconscious after the C-section, I told myself I was protecting our son from a mother who couldn't care for him. You created a fiction that made you the hero, Emma said. But what about me? Did you ever wonder what happened to me after you took our baby? The silence that followed was answer enough. I could take this to court, Emma continued. I have the birth certificate. I have evidence of the manipulation, but a prolonged legal battle would only hurt Tyler. She straightened her shoulders. So, here's what's going to happen. We establish shared custody. I become part of Tyler's life, officially, legally, and you acknowledge publicly what really happened. Richard nodded slowly. And Tyler? How do we tell him the truth? With honesty, Emma replied. And with compassion. Together. So, Emma is my real mom? Tyler sat cross-legged on the couch, looking between Richard and Emma with confusion clouding his young face. Dr. Melissa Jenkins, the child psychologist they had engaged, nodded encouragingly from a nearby chair. Yes, Richard answered gently. Emma is your biological mother. Her name was Sarah when you were born. Tyler's brow furrowed. But you said my mom died. Richard winced. That was a story I made up. I was wrong to lie to you. Emma's been your mother all along, Dr. Jenkins added softly. She just wasn't able to be with you until recently. Why didn't you tell me when you came to work? Here? Tyler asked Emma, hurt evident in his voice. Emma moved closer, though still giving him space. I wanted to get to know you first, she explained. I needed to be sure that learning the truth would make you happy, not confused or upset. Were you ever going to tell me? Yes, Emma assured him. I was just waiting for the right time. Tyler processed this, his small face serious with concentration. So do I have two moms now? Richard exchanged a glance with Emma. No, buddy. You have one mom, Emma. The story about another mom who passed away. That wasn't true. I'm sorry I lied to you. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. You lied? About something that big? I did, Richard admitted, his voice thick with emotion. And I was wrong, very wrong. The room fell silent except for Tyler's sniffles, then, surprising them all, he turned to Emma. Can I see it? The baby picture you keep in your necklace? With trembling fingers, Emma unclasped the locket and handed it to him. Tyler stared at the sonogram image intently. That's really me? When I was still in your tummy? That's you, Emma confirmed softly. I carried this picture with me every day for 7 years so I would never forget you. Tyler traced the grainy image with his fingertip. I was very small, but perfect, Emma whispered. Absolutely perfect. Tyler looked up, his eyes moving between the two adults, the father who had raised him and the mother who had been searching for him. His world had just been turned upside down, yet somehow in his child's wisdom, he seemed to understand something the adults had missed. We can still be a family, right? Just a different kind of family? The autumn leaves danced across Jefferson Park, gold and crimson against the fading green of summer. 3 months had passed since the truth had shattered, and then rebuilt their lives in ways none of them could have imagined. Emma adjusted her scarf against the October chill as she watched Tyler race toward the playground, his energy boundless, as always. She sat on what she now thought of as their bench, the same green-painted seat where this journey had begun when a little boy with untied shoelaces had tumbled into her life. Sorry I'm late, Richard said, settling beside her with a respectful distance between them. The board meeting ran long. It's fine, Emma replied. We just got here ourselves. The awkwardness that had characterized their early interactions had gradually transformed into something approaching comfortable coexistence. The custody hearing last week had formalized their arrangement, shared legal custody, with Tyler dividing his time between Richard's mansion and Emma's new apartment just 10 minutes away. "How's the apartment working out?" Richard asked, his eyes tracking Tyler as he conquered the jungle gym. "It feels like home," Emma said simply. She didn't mention that some mornings she still woke up believing she was back at the shelter, the comfort of her new life seeming too fragile to be real. The apartment had been part of their settlement, a fair arrangement that acknowledged the years of hardship Richard's actions had caused while avoiding a public legal battle that would have only hurt Tyler more. Emma had also received a substantial financial settlement, most of which remained untouched in a trust while she pursued the teaching degree she had abandoned 7 years ago. "Tyler's teacher called yesterday," Richard said. "His reading has improved again. She said whatever techniques you're using, they're working wonders." Emma smiled. "He's a natural learner once you understand how his mind works." They fell into silence, watching their son. Tyler had adjusted to the new reality with the remarkable resilience of childhood, though there had been difficult moments. Questions about why Emma had let Daddy take him, nightmares that left him calling for both parents, confusion about where home truly was. "Dad! Emma! Watch this," Tyler shouted, preparing to descend the slide head first. "Feet first, please," they called in unintentional unison, then exchanged surprised glances that melted into cautious smiles. As Tyler raced over to join them, Emma noticed he was wearing the new sneakers they had purchased together last weekend, his first shopping trip with his mother. "Can you show Emma how I taught you to tie your shoes?" Richard asked. Tyler beamed. "Actually, I want to show Dad how you tie them, Emma. The special way that never comes undone." Emma demonstrated the double loop technique, guiding Tyler's small fingers through the motions. Richard watched with genuine interest, this simple skill a bridge between their separate relationships with their son. "I'm going to show Liam," Tyler announced, spotting his friend from school. He dashed off, leaving his parents in a moment of unexpected privacy. Richard reached into his pocket and withdrew Emma's locket, the one containing the sonogram that had been her only connection to Tyler for 7 years. "You left this at the BAME house last week," he said, placing it in her palm. "I had it cleaned and the chain repaired." Emma opened it, surprised to find a second photograph now accompanying the sonogram, a recent picture of Tyler between his parents at the zoo, all three smiling despite the complicated emotions behind their expressions. I thought, you might want both the beginning and the present," Richard explained awkwardly. "Thank you," Emma said, genuinely touched by the gesture. In the distance, Tyler was explaining something to his friend with animated gestures. "This is my family," they heard him say clearly across the playground. "We didn't start out together, but we ended up together." Richard's eyes met Emma's over those innocent words. There was no romantic reconciliation between them. Too much had happened, too many wounds still healing. But something else had formed. A mutual respect born of shared love for their son. A commitment to move forward with honesty and integrity. "He's remarkable," Richard said quietly. "He is," Emma agreed. "And he deserves parents who can put his needs above their own history." As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the park, Emma fastened the locket around her neck. The weight of it felt different now, no longer a burden of loss but a testament to perseverance, to the strange and winding path that had led her back to her child. Tyler ran back to them, cheeks flushed with exertion and happiness. "Can we get hot chocolate, all three of us?" Emma looked to Richard, who nodded. "I think that sounds perfect," she said, taking her son's hand. They walked together toward the park exit, not as the family they might have been in another life, but as the family they had chosen to become in this one, bound by a child's love and the tentative hope that truth, however painful, could ultimately lead to healing. In her pocket, Emma carried her acceptance letter to the teaching credential program. In Richard's briefcase were the documents for his company's new family-friendly policies, and between them walked Tyler, secure in the knowledge that he was deeply loved, not just by one parent, but by two who had finally found a way to put the past behind them, not for their sakes, but for his. The end.